Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. Hello, I'm Clara. I'm 30 now, but let me take you back to the time when everything began, the time that feels both like yesterday and a lifetime ago. I was a high school junior, lost in the sea of faces, always the wallflower. Anxiety was my constant companion, whispering doubts and fears into my ear. It was in Mr. Henderson's chemistry class where my story took an unexpected turn. Morning class. Today we're starting lab partners for the semester, Mr. Henderson announced one ordinary Tuesday. I remember glancing around, praying for someone kind, or at least someone who wouldn't notice my nervousness. Clara, you're with Jake, he said, and a buzz ran through the classroom. Jake was everyone's dream partner, smart, popular, captain of the soccer team. Why me? I shuffled to the lab bench where Jake was setting up. Hey, I'm Jake, he said, flashing a smile that could melt hearts. Guess we're stuck together, huh? His ease did nothing to calm my racing heart. Yeah, I guess so, I managed to stutter out, fumbling with a beaker. We started the experiment, and I was hyper-aware of his presence. The way his hand effortlessly maneuvered the pipette, his casual laugh when I almost dropped the test tube. Careful there, he joked, steadying my hand. We don't want an explosion on our first day. His kindness caught me off guard. Thanks, I'm just not great with this stuff, I admitted, expecting him to laugh or roll his eyes. Instead, he leaned in closer. Hey, no worries. I've got your back, he said, and there was a sincerity in his eyes that I hadn't seen in anyone at school before. We spent the rest of the class talking about the experiment, about school, about little things. It was the most I'd spoken in a class, ever. The bell rang, marking the end of the period. So, Clara, I was thinking, Jake began, as we packed up. Would you like to hang out sometime? Maybe this Friday after the game. His question caught me like a deer in headlights. Me? Did he really just ask me out? Sure, I stammered, my heart doing somersaults. I like that. His grin widened. Awesome. It's a date then. I'll text you the details. As he walked away, my mind was a whirlwind. A date with Jake, the Jake. It felt unreal, like a scene from a movie I wasn't supposed to be in. That night, lying in my bed, I replayed the day's events over and over. The way he had smiled, the ease of our conversation, the unexpected invitation. Was this really happening? The week leading up to Friday was a blur of anticipation and nerves. I had 1,000 questions. What do we talk about? What do I wear? What if it's awkward? But deep down, there was also a flicker of excitement, a hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. Friday came, and with it, a flurry of butterflies in my stomach. I found myself at the soccer field under the bright lights, watching Jake play. He was incredible on the field, moving with a grace and confidence that had the crowd cheering. After the game, he found me in the stands. Ready? He asked, his eyes shining with the thrill of his win. I nodded, and we walked out of the school together. The night air was cool, and the stars were just starting to twinkle in the sky. It felt like the world had paused, just for us. We ended up at a small diner, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and a jukebox in the corner. We talked about everything and nothing, our families, our dreams, our favorite movies. He had a way of making me feel seen, like I was the only person in the room. The diner was closing when we finally left. I had a great time tonight, Clara, Jake said, as we stood outside. I'm really glad we did this. Me too, I said, surprised by how true it was. He smiled, a soft, genuine smile. Let's do this again sometime? I nodded, a warmth spreading through my chest. I like that. As I walked home that night, the stars overhead seemed to shine a little brighter. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I was excited to find out. After that night, Jake and I became inseparable. It felt like a dream, one I never wanted to wake up from. But as in every story, reality has a way of nudging its way in. And for me, it came in the form of meeting Jake's family. A few months into our relationship, Jake invited me over for dinner. You'll love my mom, Olivia. She's a bit protective, but she's great, he assured me with a smile as we drove to his house. The closer we got, the more my nerves frayed. Meeting the parents was a big step, one I wasn't sure I was ready for. We pulled up to a quaint, two-story house, the garden meticulously maintained. As we walked up the pathway, Jake squeezed my hand. You okay? He asked, sensing my anxiety. Just a bit nervous, I confessed, trying to smile. The door swung open before we could knock. revealing a woman in her 50s, her hair perfectly styled. "Jake, my boy," she exclaimed, pulling him into a tight embrace. Then, her eyes landed on me, and her warmth seemed to cool instantly. "And you must be Clara." "Yes, ma'am." "It's nice to meet you," I said, extending my hand. She took it limply. "Olivia, please, come in." The inside of the house was as immaculate as the outside. We were led to the dining room where the table was set for three. Olivia's eyes followed me, sharp and calculating. Dinner was served, and the conversation began light: school, Jake's soccer, the weather. But then, Olivia's questions turned pointed. "So, Clara, what do your parents do?" she asked, her tone suggesting an underlying judgment. "My mom's a nurse, and my dad's an electrician," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Ah, very humble professions," she remarked, her lips curling slightly. Jake jumped in. "Clara's parents are amazing. They've worked hard to give her the best." Olivia didn't seem convinced. "And your plans after high school?" "I'm hoping to study psychology," I said. "Really? And how do you plan to pay for college?" Olivia pressed, her gaze unwavering. I felt my face flush. "I've been saving up, and I'll apply for scholarships." "Always good to be independent," she commented, but her tone was more dismissive than approving. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. Olivia's questions felt like thinly veiled criticisms, and I couldn't shake off the feeling of being judged and found wanting. As we said our goodbyes, she pulled Jake aside, whispering something in his ear. I caught a snippet. "Really think she's the right one?" On the drive home, Jake was quiet, his brow furrowed. "Are you okay?" I asked, the evening weighing heavily on me. He sighed, gripping the steering wheel. "My mom can be a bit intense. I'm sorry if she made you uncomfortable." "It's not your fault," I said, though the sting of Olivia's words lingered. "Do you think she doesn't like me?" Jake glanced at me, his expression softening. "Don't worry about her, Clara. I like you, that's all that matters." But I couldn't shake off the feeling that Olivia's disapproval was a shadow looming over us, a crack in the perfect picture Jake and I were painting. It wasn't just about Jake and me anymore. It was about fitting into a world I wasn't sure wanted me. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. School, time with Jake, and the looming presence of Olivia in the background. She called Jake often, and I could tell by his hushed tones and frustrated expressions that I was a frequent topic. One day, Jake and I were at the park, lying on the grass, looking up at the clouds. "Clara, I've been thinking," he started hesitantly. "My mom, she's just protective because she cares. But I care about you a lot. I don't want her opinions to come between us." I turned to face him, his earnest blue eyes searching mine. "I care about you too, Jake. I just don't want to be the reason for any family issues." He took my hand, intertwining our fingers. "You won't be. We'll figure this out together." As we lay there, I wanted to believe him, to believe that love could overcome these hurdles. But Olivia's words echoed in my mind, a reminder that sometimes love had to face more than just personal fears. It had to face the judgments and expectations of others. And as much as I wanted to be with Jake, I couldn't help but wonder if I was stepping into a battle I wasn't equipped to fight. The complexities of Jake's family became even more apparent as I got to know his younger brother, Trent, and Trent's wife, Rachel. It was a few weeks after the dinner at Olivia's when Jake suggested we spend a weekend at his brother's place. "It'll be fun, Clara. Trent's cool, and you'll like Rachel too. She's a bit intense, but she's got a good heart," he assured me, but I couldn't help feeling apprehensive. We arrived at Trent and Rachel's house, a modern structure with an artistic flair. Trent greeted us at the door, a stark contrast to his older brother, with his laid-back demeanor and easy smile. "Jake, Clara, great to see you guys. Come on in," he said, leading us into the living room. Rachel emerged from the kitchen, a picture of elegance and poise. "Clara, so lovely to finally meet you. Jake hasn't stopped talking about you," she said, her voice honeyed, but her eyes appraising me as if I were a curious specimen. The day started pleasantly enough. We had lunch in their sunlit dining room, the conversation flowing easily, mostly around Trent's recent work projects and Rachel's volunteer work. I started to relax, thinking maybe this visit wouldn't be as challenging as I had anticipated. However, as the day progressed, the dynamics shifted. Rachel's questions became more probing, her curiosity veering into personal territory. "So, Clara, how did you and Jake meet?" "Must have been quite a coup to catch the most eligible bachelor in town," she said, her tone light but carrying an edge. I glanced at Jake, who seemed oblivious to the undercurrent. "We met in chemistry class," I said. "It just happened." "How quaint. And do your parents approve of Jake?" Rachel continued, her gaze fixed on me. Yes, they do. They're happy for us, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Trent chimed in, breaking the tension. Hey, let's not grill Clara here. She's our guest, not a suspect. Rachel laughed, a sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm just making conversation, darling. The afternoon passed, and we found ourselves in the backyard. Trent was showing Jake his latest DIY project, while Rachel pulled me aside. You know, Clara, it's important to fit into the family you're marrying into. Olivia has certain standards. It would do you good to try and meet them. Her words felt like a cold splash of reality. I'm not trying to impress anyone, Rachel. I just want to be with Jake, I replied, my voice firmer than I felt. She raised an eyebrow. Just some friendly advice, dear. It's not always about what you want. Sometimes, it's about playing the game. The evening rolled in, and with it, a sense of unease settled over me. We were all sitting in the living room, Trent and Jake deep in conversation about some childhood memory, while Rachel's scrutinizing gaze lingered on me. I've been meaning to ask, Clara, what are your intentions with Jake? Rachel suddenly questioned, her tone casual but her intent clear. I felt like I was under a spotlight, my heart racing. My intentions? I echoed. Yes, are you serious about him? Or is this just a fleeting high school romance? She probed, her eyes unblinking. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. I care about Jake a lot. We're serious about each other. Jake, sensing the tension, joined in. Rachel, Clara doesn't have to prove anything. We're happy together, that's what matters. Trent, sensing the growing discomfort, attempted to lighten the mood. Hey, let's not get all serious. We're here to have a good time, right? The rest of the night passed with a strained cheerfulness. When we finally left, the relief was palpable. As we drove back, Jake seemed contemplative. I know Rachel can be a bit much, but don't take it to heart, Clara. She's just protective, like Mom. I get it, but it feels like I'm constantly being judged, like I have to pass some test to be with you, I said, the words spilling out. Jake reached over, taking my hand. You don't have to pass any test, Clara. You're perfect just the way you are. I love you for you, not for what my family thinks. His words were a bomb, but the doubt had already planted its seeds. As much as I wanted to believe in us, the shadow of his family's expectations loomed large. Was our love strong enough to withstand the scrutiny and pressure? Or was I fighting a losing battle? As we drove on, the city lights blurred past us, a metaphor for the whirlwind of emotions and doubts swirling within me. I wanted to be with Jake, but at what cost? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as we headed back to our own world, away from the judging eyes of his family. The day Jake and I had been waiting for finally arrived, our wedding day. Despite the hurdles we had faced with his family, we were determined to make it the best day of our lives. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and everything seemed perfect. But as I would soon learn, appearances can be deceiving. The ceremony was beautiful, set in a quaint little chapel adorned with white roses and ivy. I walked down the aisle, my heart fluttering with a mix of nervousness and excitement. Jake stood at the altar, looking dashing in his suit, his eyes brimming with love. We exchanged our vows, promising to love and cherish each other, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. The reception was held in a grand ballroom, elegantly decorated with twinkling fairy lights and delicate flower arrangements. As we entered, we were greeted with applause and cheers from our friends and family. It was a moment of pure joy, a celebration of our love. However, the festive atmosphere changed when it was time for the toasts. Olivia took the microphone, her expression solemn. I have something to say about my son and his choice, she began, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. Jake, my dear son, you know I've always wanted the best for you. But marrying Clara, I can't help but feel that you're making a mistake. I hope you come to realize this sooner rather than later. Her words cut through the air like a knife, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. I felt tears well up in my eyes, the pain of her words piercing my heart. Jake's expression turned to one of shock and then anger. Mom, how could you? He said, his voice low and full of disbelief. Olivia shrugged, a look of indifference on her face. I'm just saying what everyone is thinking. The room erupted in murmurs, the tension palpable. Jake took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Don't listen to her, Clara. She doesn't know what she's talking about. I tried to smile, but the damage was done. Olivia's words hung over the rest of the evening like a dark cloud. The next few months were a whirlwind. Jake and I moved into our new home, a cozy little place that we made our own. We were determined to move past the wedding incident and focus on our future together. But Olivia's words had a lasting impact. She tried to sabotage our relationship in subtle ways, sowing seeds of doubt and discord. She would call Jake constantly, questioning his decisions and our life together. "Are you sure Clara is the right one for you, Jake? You could do so much better," she would say, her voice dripping with insincerity. Jake was torn between his loyalty to his family and his love for me. "I don't know what to do, Clara. I love you, but my mom, she just won't let up," he confessed one night, his face etched with worry. "We'll get through this, Jake. We're stronger than her petty attempts to break us apart," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. One day, we received a surprise visit from Trent and Rachel. They came bearing news that only added to the turmoil. "We're expecting a baby," Rachel announced, her eyes shining with excitement. The news brought a temporary truce in the family. Olivia's focus shifted to the impending arrival of her grandchild, giving Jake and me some much-needed reprieve. However, the calm was short-lived. A few weeks later, Trent and Rachel hosted a baby shower, and we were invited. The event was a lavish affair, but the underlying tension was impossible to ignore. Olivia was there, her demeanor cold and distant towards me. Rachel, on the other hand, was overly enthusiastic, her attention to me feeling forced and insincere. As the day progressed, the tension reached a boiling point. Olivia cornered me in the kitchen, her words laced with venom. "You may have fooled everyone else, Clara, but not me. I know you're not right for Jake, and I'll do everything in my power to make sure he realizes that." I was taken aback by her blatant hostility. "Olivia, I love your son. I don't understand why you can't accept that." She scoffed, a cruel smile on her lips. "Love? Please. You're just a phase, and soon enough, Jake will see that." Her words stung, but I refused to let her see how much they affected me. "That's for Jake to decide, not you." The rest of the event was a blur. I felt isolated, an outsider in a family that clearly didn't want me. As Jake and I drove home, a heavy silence hung between us. "We can't keep doing this, Clara. My family, they're tearing us apart," Jake said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I know, Jake, but I don't want to lose you," I replied, my heart aching at the thought. "We need to make a decision, Clara. It's either us or them." The weight of his words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the choice we faced. Could our love survive the constant battle against his family's disapproval? Or were we destined to be torn apart by forces beyond our control? As we drove into the night, the uncertainty of our future loomed large, a question mark over the life we had built together. The year following our wedding brought its share of ups and downs, but nothing could have prepared me for the storm that was about to hit. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon when our world was turned upside down. Jake and I were lounging in our living room, enjoying the rare tranquility of a weekend with no plans, when a sudden loud banging on our front door jolted us from our peaceful cocoon. Jake got up to answer, and I followed, curious about the unexpected visitor. Standing at our doorstep were Olivia, Rachel, and Trent, their faces a mix of anger and triumph. My heart sank. This was not a friendly visit. "What's going on?" Jake asked, his voice laced with confusion and concern. Olivia stepped forward, her eyes burning with intensity. "We have proof, Jake. Proof that your precious wife has been unfaithful." My world stopped spinning. "What? That's ridiculous," I exclaimed, feeling like I was in some sort of twisted nightmare. Trent held up a stack of photos and a folder. "We hired a private investigator. These photos don't lie, Clara." Jake took the photos, his hands shaking. As he flipped through them, his face turned pale. I peered over his shoulder and saw images of a woman, resembling me, in compromising positions with a man I didn't recognize. My heart pounded in my chest. It looked like me, but it couldn't be. This isn't me," I stammered, feeling sick. Rachel snorted. "Denial is the first stage, Clara, but the evidence is clear." I felt like I was suffocating, the walls of our home closing in on me. "Jake, you have to believe me. I've never seen that man before. I would never do anything to hurt you." Jake looked at me, his eyes searching for the truth. "I want to believe you, Clara, but these photos, how can you explain them?" I grabbed the photos, desperately looking for something, anything, that would prove my innocence. My eyes landed on a photo where the woman had a tattoo on her right arm, a tattoo I didn't have. "Look, Jake, I don't have a tattoo. This isn't me," I said, showing him my bare arm. Jake examined the photo closely, his brow furrowed. "She's right. Clara doesn't have a tattoo." Olivia scoffed. "Tattoos can be temporary. She's clever enough to use one as a disguise." Trent interjected. "The investigator followed her for months. This is solid evidence." Jake turned to me, his eyes filled with pain and confusion. Clara, if there's anything you need to tell me, now is the time. My heart ached at his words. Jake, you know me. I love you more than anything. I could never betray you like this. The room was thick with tension, each of us trapped in a whirlwind of emotions. I felt like I was drowning, struggling to keep my head above water. Suddenly, Jake's expression changed from confusion to realization. Wait a minute, he said, scrutinizing another photo. I know this place. This is near my office. He looked at me, his eyes clearing. Clara, I know you're telling the truth. This has to be a setup. Olivia's face twisted in anger. You're blinded by your love for her, Jake. Can't you see she's deceiving you? Jake shook his head. No, Mom. I know Clara. She wouldn't do this. Someone is trying to frame her. Trent stepped forward, his voice firm. Jake, we did this for you. To show you the truth. I felt a surge of anger. The truth? You invaded our privacy, our life, based on your suspicions. How could you do this? The room was a battlefield, lines drawn between truth and lies. Jake stood by my side, a united front against the accusations that threatened to tear us apart. Rachel broke the silence, her voice cold. If you won't listen to reason, Jake, then you're a fool. We were trying to protect you. Jake's response was calm but resolute. I don't need protection from my wife. What I need is a family that supports me, not one that conspires against me. The tension in the room was palpable, a ticking time bomb of emotions. In that moment, I realized the depth of the divide between us and Jake's family. They were willing to go to extreme lengths to prove their point, regardless of the truth. Olivia, Rachel, and Trent eventually left. Their mission failed. The door closing behind them felt like a chapter ending, a painful but necessary parting of ways. As Jake and I sat in the aftermath, the weight of what had just transpired hung heavily over us. I'm so sorry, Clara, Jake said, his voice heavy with emotion. I should have never doubted you. I leaned into him, seeking comfort in his embrace. It's not your fault, Jake. We're in this together, remember? But as we sat there, holding on to each other, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The accusation had left a scar, a reminder of the lengths to which Olivia and her allies would go to undermine our relationship. The battle might have been won, but the war was far from over. After the storm of accusations had passed, Jake and I were left in a fragile state of quiet. The air in our home felt heavy, charged with unspoken fears and uncertainties about our future. We knew we couldn't let this break us, but the path forward was shrouded in doubt. In the days that followed, our conversations were a mix of reassurances and planning. We were determined to not let Olivia's actions dictate our lives. We need to stand strong, Clara. Together, Jake said one evening as we sat on our porch, watching the sunset. I agree, but how do we move past this? Your family. I trailed off, the words catching in my throat. Jake took my hand, his grip firm. We'll set boundaries. If they can't respect our relationship, then they don't get to be a part of our lives. It's harsh, but necessary. The decision wasn't easy, but it felt right. We couldn't live under the constant shadow of doubt and manipulation. We needed to forge our own path, even if it meant distancing ourselves from those who couldn't accept us. A week later, we met with Olivia, Trent, and Rachel at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in town. The air was tense as we sat down at the table. We need to talk, Jake began, his voice steady. What happened cannot be overlooked. Clara and I are united, and we will not tolerate any more attempts to undermine our relationship. Olivia's face was a mask of stoicism, but I could see the flicker of defiance in her eyes. I was only trying to protect you, Jake. By hiring a private investigator and fabricating lies? That's not protection, that's control, Jake retorted. Rachel chimed in, her tone conciliatory. We may have gone too far, but our intentions were good. Good intentions don't excuse harmful actions, I said, finding my voice. What you did was a breach of trust and privacy. The conversation was a difficult dance of accusations and defenses. Trent remained mostly silent, his eyes downcast. As the discussion went on, it became clear that a simple apology wouldn't suffice. The damage was deep, the rift wide. We need space, Jake declared. Until we can trust that something like this won't happen again, we need to take a step back from this family dynamic. The words hung in the air, a final verdict on years of strained relationships and unmet expectations. Olivia, Rachel, and Trent didn't protest. Perhaps they too understood the gravity of their actions. As we walked away from that meeting, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. The path ahead would be challenging, but necessary for our own peace and happiness. The following months were a time of healing and growth for Jake and me. We focused on building our own world, one where trust and love were the foundations. We spent evenings talking about our dreams, our fears, and everything in between. I never knew how heavy it all was until now, Jake confessed one night. Letting go of that negativity, it's like I can breathe again. I feel the same, I admitted. It's like we're finally living for ourselves, not in the shadow of others' expectations. Our journey wasn't without its bumps. There were days when the silence from Jake's family felt like a gaping hole, a reminder of what we had lost. But in those moments, we found strength in each other. We're a team, Clara. No matter what comes our way, Jake would say, his words a balm to any lingering doubts. As time passed, our wounds began to heal, turning into scars that reminded us of what we had endured and overcome. We became more involved in our community, making new friends and forging connections that were based on mutual respect and understanding. One evening, as we sat in our backyard, Jake brought up the topic of starting our own family. I think we're ready, Clara, to bring new life into our world, our way. The idea filled me with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Are we ready? After everything? We're more than ready. We've been through the worst and came out stronger. It's time to focus on our future, on building something beautiful together. As I looked into his eyes, filled with hope and love, I knew he was right. It was time to look forward, to build our own legacy, one rooted in the love and resilience that had seen us through our darkest times. And so, we stepped into the next chapter of our lives, hand in hand, hearts full of hope. The road ahead was ours to pave, a journey of love, growth, and endless possibilities. Together, we were ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that as long as we had each other, we could weather any storm.